From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is U.S. Farm Report.
Welcome to U.S. Farm Report this pre-Christmas weekend. I'm Tyne Morgan, and here's what's in store over the next 60 minutes. Chaos in Washington as the incoming administration slams the spending bill, a bill that would be a big boost for ag.
It's just cash infusion at the time where now a number of farmers will be able to get cash flow loans next year.
As the spending measure saw roadblocks midweek, it threw into question farmer and disaster aid, plus the possibility of year-round E15.
It'll make a marginal difference. And by that I mean it really has to do with infrastructure, and it always has to do with distribution.
Plus, California becoming the first state to declare a state of emergency over avian flu. And meet a young maverick in Illinois.
As a farm, it's just like a sports team. You're only as good as your weakest link.
This 29-year-old is pushing the envelope and will take you to his farm to show you how. Now for the news, Congress at the end of the week attempting to avert a government shutdown by working on a continuing resolution, coming up with an initial plan that would have key provisions for both farmers and ranchers. The original bill included $10 billion in farmer financial aid, $21 billion in ag disaster aid for farmers and ranchers. That includes $2 billion of that for livestock producers impacted by disasters, which was part of an overall $100.4 billion disaster package within the spending bill. There was also an extension of the 2018 Farm Bill without an increase in reference prices and a provision for year-round sales of E15. However, President-elect Trump midweek calling portions of the bill into question, criticizing that it favors Democratic priorities and urged Republicans to tie spending measures to a debt ceiling increase. We're going to dive deeper into the proposal for farmers in this week's Farm Journal report. Also out of Washington, the top Democratic leadership of the House Ag Committee is changing, with House Democrats removing Representative David Scott of Georgia as their senior Agriculture Committee leader. It comes after he received just 5 votes in Monday's influential steering panel vote. It's reported Scott has faced health issues this year. This week, Representative Angie Craig of Minnesota was elected to serve as the ranking member of the committee. Craig indicated in part of her pitch to the steering panel that there were no other ranking members for Democrats from the Midwest. Craig saying in a statement on X that her focus will be on improving people's lives, not scoring political points, adding that they can strengthen the farm safety net and open the doors of opportunity to new and beginning farmers. Craig has been in Congress since 2019. The CDC confirmed this week a person is hospitalized with a severe case of avian flu in Louisiana. Health officials say this marks the first time there's been a severe illness linked to H5N1 in the U.S. They say the case was confirmed last Friday. They report while the source of the infection is ongoing, it was determined the patient had exposure to sick and dead birds in backyard flocks. They add no person-to-person spread of the virus has been detected, and they continue to say the risk to the general public remains low. California has become the first state in the nation to proclaim a state of emergency when it comes to avian flu. The state's governor saying the proclamation is an effort to streamline and expedite the state's response. It comes as more cases of the virus were detected in dairy cows on farms in Southern California. Now, as for testing for H5N1 in dairy, APHIS is announcing a second round of states coming on board as part of its national milk testing strategy. It requires that raw, unpasteurized milk samples nationwide be collected and shared with USDA for testing for the virus. Indiana, Maryland, Montana, New York, Ohio, Vermont, and Washington state are coming on board, which will mean 13 states will be taking part in the program. An update on efforts to keep New World screwworm out of the U.S. USDA announcing Mexican cattle imports under new protocols won't resume until early next year. The recent resurgence of New World screwworm in Central America and Mexico has severely impacted the cattle trade between the U.S. and Mexico. USDA's chief veterinary officer confirming shipments will start incrementally after the new year. The agency is allocating $165 million from the Commodity Credit Corporation to combat New World screwworm. The National Corn Growers Association is announcing the winners of this year's yield contest, and the top finisher, well, it's a familiar name. The highest yield of the year came from Charles City, Virginia, with David Hula at 490.62 bushels per acre. And if Hula's name is familiar, that's because he also won it last year with a record 623.84 bushels to the acre. This is the 13th time he has won. who, along with other winners, will be honored at Commodity Classic in Denver in March. That's it for the news. Parts of the U.S. seeing significant snowfall this week. We'll have a check of your forecast coming up next.
U.S. Farm Report is brought to you by Pioneer. The Pioneer lineup of corn hybrids packs 100 years of innovation into every bag for a home field advantage that delivers higher profit potential and winning yield potential. Your best years starts with Pioneer. U.S. Farm Report weather is brought to you by H&S Manufacturing. The Big Dog forage boxes feature stainless steel sides, front panel, and rear door and come in 26 and 30-foot models to fit your needs. Learn more at the H&S website.
Well, we're not expected to see White Christmas here in Kansas City, but we did see some snowfall across parts of the U.S. this week. Jack Van Meter has a check of your forecast this weekend.
We are looking at the end of a lingering clipper system moving through the eastern parts of the United States. We can see, again, very minimal snow amounts really being deposited. We're talking maybe a trace up to an inch of snow, a very moisture-starved system. That being said, what's going to happen is that center of low pressure will finally move off to the east coast there, right around Richmond and New York City, and pretty much get more moisture from the Atlantic Ocean. Then actually, we see another weak clipper system moving from Alberta here, and that'll be moving down again, depositing just a little bit of snow. Nothing wild there, but again, we are looking at another center of low pressure really starting to develop off the coast here of Portland and move inland. And what's going to happen is, of course, all that warmer air is going to be forced up on the mountains of Idaho there and actually start to condense and freeze. And that's why we're going to be seeing some mountain snows going into next week. And it's all being forced by the jet stream. So let's go ahead and put this in motion. As we can see, little disturbance just clipping parts of the Great Lakes states, the far northern Great Lakes states, especially right around the northern part of Superior. And actually, we're watching another bit of a disturbance, a little itty bitty trough starting to move off into the west coast as another one follows there. And actually, that's when we're going to be seeing a little bit of a chance of rain, especially for the heartland of the country, and of course moving into the eastern parts of the country. One of the main reasons why we're taking a look at our new precipitation outlook, and as we can see again for parts of Arkansas there and actually a bit of Missouri too, we are seeing an above average chance of precipitation just because it's pulling a lot of moisture from the Gulf of Mexico up, but also take a look at the west coast there. My goodness, we're talking about Portland and Seattle. They're really seeing that above average chance of precipitation. Why? Well, we have a center of low pressure that again is turning out into the Pacific there and moving a lot of moisture inland there. And where we're seeing a lot of rain, there's also areas where we're seeing moisture starved areas. We're talking southern Four Corner states in Arizona and New Mexico. Actually, all the way back here up in Maine, right around Bangor area up there. And take a look at this temperature outlook. Again, it's very safe to say that we are looking at a very, very warm end to 2024. My goodness, just take a look at these very, very warm temperatures. We can see nobody on the map is actually going to be in the blue or below normal. Actually, it's going to be quite the opposite. And it looks like 2025 is going to be starting off on a rather hot note.
Thanks, Jack. Well, are soybeans the anchor for corn prices, and what will it take for prices to rally next year? Plus, cattle numbers don't seem to be improving, but beef supplies are actually on the rise. What could that mean for prices? I ask Chris Swift and Tommy Grisafi next. Welcome back. Well, joining us this weekend to talk markets, Chris Swift of Swift Trading Company out of Nashville, and Tommy Grisafi, who recently moved to Nashville with Nesvik Trading. Thank you both for joining us. Let's dive right in. Okay, I know the CR this week, it's been up in the air, but the inclusion of year-round E15 initially, Tommy, it didn't even move the corn market. Why?
It's funny you mentioned that because a dear friend of mine who was in front of a Bloomberg terminal, he texted, he said, "Did you see this?" And I, of course, I was driving. I looked at my phone. I said, "Yeah, it's not doing anything." You know, what reaction are we looking for? I know it's something we talk about all the time, but the corn market's just a little engine that could. It's been trading up. Obviously, it traded down the last few days towards the end of the week, but it's doing so much better than the bean market. Maybe the answer is simple enough that the market doesn't care. The funds have a small long position. It's Christmas time as I'm wearing my red tie, and professional traders have left the room. If you are having a good year trading, you are done. if you're having a bad year trading, you're wishing you were done. The money is left. Anyone else left trading these markets, the markets will have to move to an extreme enough price to get that speculator or fund back in the market time.
Are we seeing a similar situation, Chris, when it comes to the cattle markets? Are the funds just kind of tired at this point?
No, actually, we have seen some of the largest commodity fund growth in the livestock as we've seen ever. Maybe after yesterday's report of the Fed announcing they may not lower rates anymore coming into 2025, that tended to spook the equities market. Now we see that McDonald's is also starting to put out, showing they're having lower consumer traffic in there. They're not paying for as much in the having to buy a lot more value meals. So when we talk about the commodity funds in there, we know that they look at a lot of economic data. And right now, some of that economic data seems to be pointing more towards greater inflation than what it does deflation.
So, Chris, then was that the story of what was really pressuring boxed beef prices this week?
I think a lot of it is when we look at the boxed beef market, we know that we've had cattle prices higher and we move those prices consistently up through the chain to the supply chain. But as we see around that 315 to 317 level in the boxes, that tends to start making a retail price for our steaks and our roast at a level where the consumer begins to question whether or not they want to pay for that or potentially go to an alternative protein program.
Interesting. All right, Tommy, you kind of alluded to it earlier. I mean, corn does have a bullish story, but are soybeans the anchor that will prevent corn prices from moving higher in 2025? Because when you look at corn, you look at soybeans, it seems like there's two different stories unfolding for those commodities.
Yeah, I could call a client right now and say, corn, we had a 2.2 billion carryout. Heck, if we watched this show a year ago, we were talking about a 3 billion carryout. That didn't happen. 2.2 turned into 2 to 1.8 to 1.7. Spreads tightened. Basis, cash market firmed. The market rallied. That, when we traded 450 in March, tens of millions of bushels traded. So buyers, sellers, speculators, farmers with priced orders all traded right there. Such a smoother transition when we talk about corn. We talk about beans. Still amazed we had that dollar rally at harvest. And I feel farmers kind of poo-pooed it. They're like, oh yeah, that's it's just getting started. The fundamentals are so bearish when you look at the world bean stocks and you look at South America just trying to bury the American farmer. Now, as we come into 2025, you and all the analysts, we're going to have the great acre debate coming into the end of March crop report when we say the acres planting intentions. I met with farmers a lot the last week as I traveled across America, and I asked them, corn, soybeans, wheat, why? And that's a great question that the debate will happen. The function of the market will work. That corn-bean spread is really widening out. Right now, corn looks favorable, but if you're going to plant corn, you better hedge corn time.
Yeah, so what is the hard truth that farmers really need to realize as we head into 2025? We're going to talk about that after the break. Welcome back. All right, Chris, I'm going to start with you because cattle, that has been the bullish story really in the markets when we look at this past year. We know that cattle numbers aren't increasing, yet cattle supplies are beef supplies are on the rise. And so when you look at that story and how that's unfolding, what could that mean for prices as we move into 2025, Chris?
Well, we're looking for expansion right now. We have one of the lowest herd sizes that we've had since 1961, and there is a great desire to want to expand. Drought and money play the most important parts of that. And through most of the summer, we experienced great drought. Then we came into the October timeframe where it started to rain, and we shifted tremendous numbers of cattle that were destined for the feed yards back out onto wheat pastures. Those cattle will come back in again, ready to go on feed in the March, April timeframe off that wheat, weighing anywhere from 200 to 300 pounds, even heavier than that. So we realized that as we come into the spring, we're consistently going to have about the same number of cattle, with expansion being the trigger, whether or not we start to see lower numbers go on feed or we continue with about the same. But right now, it looks like we're just going to continue to move laterally more than expand, simply because the money that they are getting for cattle right now is much more attractive than holding that heifer back and waiting for a year and a half or almost 2 years before we can make the next sale.
Well, it's all about supplies when it comes to the cattle market. It's all about supplies, too, when it comes to the crop markets, Tommy. And when you look at just the potential supplies we could have and the huge acres we could have for corn, What will it take to move the markets higher? I was talking specifically corn, soybeans, wheat. What is it going to take to move the markets higher in 2025?
We'd love a weather problem everywhere but here. We want the United States to have perfect weather, perfect planting conditions. We need a weather problem somewhere else. Keep an eye on the dollar. Recently, after the Fed meeting, we've seen dollar strength. That'll play into the markets, may not be favorable. Watch the Brazilian currencies. There's a lot of moving parts. A lot of talk of, hey, the government's going to give the farmer money. That is extremely bearish. If the government's giving you money, they're saying we want lower food costs, which was promised so heavily during the election, is that we need, what did people talk about at the polls? Higher insurance, higher food, higher this, Tyne. Everything's become expensive. So what can we do to get food costs lower? That's bearish. But Mother Nature and other things take over. Never underestimate how fast the markets can rally. Keep that upside open. We don't have crop insurance yet. Layer in some floors. Hope for the best, deal with the rest. 2025 is going to happen whether you're prepared for it or not.
Chris, one of the stories that was a bit surprising late this year has been this New World screwworm, and that really was impacting the cattle markets as we saw that export news unfold. But is that kind of old news at this point? Is that not really a story in the cattle markets any longer?
It seems like it. We know that that particular flyworm can be controlled very easily. We've done it before. We eradicated it here in the United States 30 years earlier. I think what we're looking for now is for it to reopen the border. They have set up all kinds of guidelines and testing stations for those cattle to come across the border. So since that's already in progress, I think it's less than weeks before we start seeing cattle actually move over the border.
All right, Chris, real quick to end things, what's your advice for cattle producers as we head into the new year?
These are really high prices right now, and we have been able to increase beef production significantly this year. I think we'll continue to do that with prices really high. It's a good time to put something up underneath it. Same thing Tommy's just about to talk about the corn farmers. We lost dollars in the price of corn and beans in a very unexpected move. This could be a very unexpected move too. So why not have something up underneath there to keep you from having to start from scratch again?
Yep. And Tommy, real quick, what's your advice for farmers?
I want you to run a balance sheet, and if corn is $1 lower a year from now and beans are $2 lower, what will that do? If you can handle that, 2025 will be okay. It's not going to be fun. Everything above that we can get through. We'll have crop insurance prices discovered in February. Then we can help manage the risk better. Run a worst case scenario. Talk to the family about it. Talk to your banker. Don't freeze up. Ask for help.
Merry Christmas to the both of you. We need to take a quick break, and then we're checking in with Machinery Pete next.
Hey, welcome back to Tractor Tales, folks. Something special for you this week. We're going to Texas to check out a Farmall cub that's been in the family since brand new.
Back in 1995, was it your dad? 96, her dad passed away. Prior to that, he had a dairy, and then he ended up in the milk business, transporting milk from one dairy barn to the other. But during that time, he enjoyed doing gardening. So in 1955, he purchased this cub tractor along with the equipment that went with it. He produced quite a bit of vegetables with it, including corn, and he would just give it away. When he passed away, we took the tractor and it needed to be reconditioned, so we had it reconditioned, we did. And then a few years later after that, we just kept driving and enjoying it. And finally, I joined a tractor club, which was Chapter 25 with John Bellman. And at that time, it had been reconditioned, so we decided we'd put a sign on it.
Sharp Red Farmall. My daddy's last name was Sharp.
So we put the signs
Sharp
in there.
Red Farmall Cub.
And it says,
in memory of E.H. Sharp Jr., Christian veteran, father, grandfather, and friend. God bless America.
So talk about the restoration of this.
Well, when I called, I didn't do any of it. What I did was I found out at the time there was guys that did this. And when they told me, they said, oh, it's going to be probably $1,600. And I said, that sounds great. So I figured Elizabeth didn't have to know.
And my birthday was coming
up.
So
it cost about $5,000. So when I told her, she said, you came real close to divorce, even though this is my dad's.
It was happy birthday, a redone tractor.
Anyway, but you know what? We've been blessed by it. He liked the idea of taking care of things. So to take it and redo it and make it look nice, he would appreciate that a lot. He was the kind of guy that kept things up.
Thanks, Greg. Well, when we come back, it's not surprising that chaos unfolded in Washington as legislators tried to wrap up things for the year. That typically happens. But what was surprising is how much it impacted ag. We'll break it all down in our Farm Journal report next.
You're watching U.S. Farm Report. Trusted, timely, tradition.
Well, after months of farm state legislators pushing for financial relief for farmers, those wishes came true in the original stopgap spending measure released midweek. But the fate of that deal was then thrown into disarray. But why was ag said to have scored big in the original legislation? Well, that's this week's Farm Journal report. A last-minute effort to avoid a government shutdown took center stage in Washington this week.
We worked really hard to achieve consensus on a bill that responsibly funds the government into March of next year.
A bill more than 1,500 pages in length, and the initial language showed agriculture could be poised to score big.
It's just cash infusion at the time where now a number of farmers will be able to get cash flow loans next year.
The stopgap spending bill would last through March 15th. And when it comes to ag, the bill includes $31 billion in total aid for producers. That includes $10 billion in direct payments and $21 billion in disaster aid for farmers and ranchers. The measure that brought a bit of a surprise was year-round E15, but the measure also included a one-year extension of the 2018 Farm Bill, but without an increase to reference prices.
This shows the muscle of the ag sector, not only farm state lawmakers, but commodity and farm groups and also agricultural bankers.
The biggest benefit for ag, according to Farm CPA Paul Neiffer, is the possible $10 billion in direct payments for producers, plus the disaster aid.
Bottom line is you got an extra $10 billion of injected liquidity into your system automatically. And then for those farmers that were facing some type of disaster, drought, wildfire, hurricanes, etc., you're going to get an extra about $10 billion for 23, an extra about $10 billion for 2024. There's $2 billion automatically allocated for livestock out of that $20 billion, so to speak.
The direct aid is through what's being called the Ag Economic Loss Program. So what do the possible payments look like? Well, according to Neiffer's early calculations, per acre payments could be nearly $44 for corn, more than $30 for soybeans, and close to $32 for wheat. And the payments are even larger for cotton and rice.
The payment limit now is $125,000 per person per entity. So a LLC with 4 equal owners, they're only going to get 1 payment limit. Now, if it's a general partnership, they get 4 payment limits. What this says is if your average gross income, which is your income from selling corn, selling soybeans, and so on, if that's more than 75% of your total gross income, including wages and interest and dividends, then you qualify for the double payment.
In total, it's $10 billion in direct payments, which is severely scaled back from the earlier proposal in the Farm Act.
It's similar, but they throttled it back because the Farm Act originally scored a little over $20 billion, and this is, this is $10 billion.
AgWeb conducted a poll of farmers asking if Congress should approve economic aid for farmers before year end. Out of the 2,500 farmers who responded, 71% said yes. But when it comes to payments, not everyone thinks the infusion of dollars in the ag economy will be good for farmers.
It is needed. I mean, we talked to plenty of regional banks, and this is renewal season, and they are having a difficult time, for sure. It's a sad commentary on what the farm economy looks like. But the fact of the matter is that going back to marginal, nobody wants to be called a marginal farmer, but there are marginal farmers out there. And what this does is it allows the marginal farmer or the hobby farmer back in the game.
Peter Meyer is the crops economist for Muddy Boots Ag. He thinks the inflation cycle in ag actually started with the market facilitation program payments.
So now you have direct payments, which it's probably going to end up in the pockets of your input supplier, right? Because your input supplier is not going to lower his or her prices because now they know you have a few extra dollars in your pocket.
Meyer says 2 things need to happen for the farm economy to recover. He says one is a reset in input and machinery prices. The other is more demand.
And where we get that demand from, I mean, I can point to sustainable aviation fuel just as a perfect example of that, right? But who knows what the rules are on 45Z or sustainable aviation fuel? So that's still an unknown.
In the CR this week, one of the more shocking developments was the addition of E15 year-round. But Meyer doesn't think it will amount to much added demand in the short term.
It'll make a marginal difference. And by that, I mean, it really has to do with infrastructure, and it always has to do with distribution.
Paul Hughes is chief agricultural economist for S&P Global Commodity Insights. He agrees that the short-term impact will be minimal. One reason is because of the strong ethanol exports the U.S. is already seeing.
I think it's fair to say right now that the USDA, all things the same before this, is too low on ethanol already, at least by 50 million bushels. Arguably, you could say it's 150 million bushels. They're too low. This would certainly increase that. I would say maybe by another 1% or more. I probably wouldn't go more than that in this year.
He says 1% would be about 50 million more bushels of corn.
But as time goes on, and if ethanol continues to pull its weight as far as the economics are concerned, 3 or 4 or 5 years from now, this could be something that really moves the needle as far as ethanol production and corn demand from the ethanol sector.
The entire spending measure had bipartisan support after it was released, but by Wednesday afternoon, it hit a snag. President-elect Donald Trump and Vice President-elect J.D. Vance releasing a statement on X Wednesday urging Congress to not pass a spending bill with so much pork. In the statement, the incoming administration said, quote, Republicans want to support our farmers, pay for disaster relief, and set our country up for success in 2025. The only way to do that with a temporary funding bill is without Democrat giveaways combined with an increase in the debt ceiling. Anything else is a betrayal of our country, end quote. The battle in Washington this week could be a signal of what's ahead, as spending will be in the spotlight during the upcoming Trump administration. Now, Meyer pointing out, as things set today, margins for row crop farmers look even worse for 2025. So this debate isn't going anywhere. Well, when we come back, it's a glimpse of ag around the globe. That's next. $140 billion. That's how much the fertilizer industry contributes to the U.S. economy, according to a new study from the Fertilizer Institute. You could read more about it over at agweb.com, but the report says the fertilizer industry directly accounts for more than 46,000 manufacturing jobs, 17,000 wholesale jobs, and nearly 50,000 retail jobs. So if you multiply it out, the industry supports 500,000 American workers and makes up $36.5 billion in employment income. The Fertilizer Institute says the report is a good reminder about the complexity of the industry's network and its reliance on open markets and fair competition. They're keeping a close eye on the incoming administration and what that could mean for fertilizer.
We're still over a month away from that administration transition, so we have some time to kind of put our strategy together. But bottom line, if there is some sort of a tariff strategy there that the Trump administration uses, I would feel pretty confident that we would find a way to get fertilizer and perhaps other ag products exempt from that, because we couldn't face that as a producer here in the U.S.
To put the importance of trade into perspective, 40% of U.S. phosphate exports, most of which is mined in Florida, went to Canada in 2023. In turn, the U.S. imports about 98% of our potash needs. About 87% of it comes from Canada. Speaking of Canada, it may be considering implementing export taxes on major commodities to the U.S. Bloomberg and the Wall Street Journal are reporting it would be a potential response to President-elect Trump's threat to impose broad tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China. Canada may apply taxes on uranium, oil, and potash. However, the Canadian government views export taxes as a last resort. Experts say Canada is more likely to implement retaliatory tariffs on U.S.-made goods and apply export controls on certain Canadian products. Well, a key person who helped negotiate the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement for Canada is resigning. Chrystia Freeland, Canada's finance minister, was also the country's deputy prime minister. She says Prime Minister Justin Trudeau told her last week he no longer wanted her to serve as finance minister and that she was being offered a different cabinet position. She said in a letter that recently she and Trudeau had been, quote, at odds about the best path forward for Canada, end quote. She also cited concerns about how the country should respond to President-elect Trump's economic policies, saying Mr. Trump's threat to impose 25% tariffs on Canadian imports is, quote, a grave challenge. We've been talking about the hurdles in Washington as the incoming administration slammed the spending bill this week, and we'll hear from one senator in Chip's Corner next. Time now for Chip's Corner. Chip Flory joining us now. Chip, we talked about it in our Farm Journal report, but the spending measure really thrown into chaos, thrown into question because the incoming Trump administration scrutinizing the amount of spending that is in this bill. But I know you had conversations with legislators this week, and even though the spending measure did get bipartisan support, not every legislator is on board.
Yeah, that is exactly right. And there are a lot of people that are questioning whether or not an economic aid package in the continuing resolution for farmers is really necessary. And it's not just legislators that are asking that question. Farmers are asking the question. There are farmers that are saying, listen, we don't need to do this because we're coming off of good crops. We had better marketing opportunities than what we've got right now. There is a disaster aid included that is to help cover those that did struggle with a crop shortfall in 2023-24. So the question then becomes, what is the real reason for the economic aid that President-elect Trump supports? I asked U.S. Senator Jerry Moran from Kansas about that earlier last week.
I'm opposed to continuing resolutions. I'm a member of the Appropriations Committee. Do our work in regular order, pass the appropriation bills, bring them to the Senate floor, take a vote, and give every member of the Senate an opportunity to amend them and debate them and then vote. And we didn't get our work done. It's like the Farm Bill. The Farm Bill, one of the reasons that this is necessary is that the Farm Bill never got completed on time, and neither did the appropriations process.
So, Tyne, what we're talking about here is the economic aid is really cover for Congress not getting the work done in the past 2 years. Yeah, we had good crops. We've had good marketing opportunities, but the cost structure has changed so dramatically. Now, this farm bill is 2 years late, okay? But the reference prices that we are dealing with in Title I of the commodity bill are from 2018. So we're not just talking about the bill being 2 years old. It's now 7 years old, and we're dealing with a cost structure in that farm bill safety net program that is 7 years old. I think that's what legislators are saying when they say we need to get this economic package included for farmers.
Well, and it's also key to note that even though we did see an extension of the 2018 Farm Bill in that original proposed spending bill, it did not include an increase to reference prices, something that I know a lot of farm state legislators were pushing for. But according to Jim Wiesmeyer, Chip, he says that Chairman G.T. Thompson says they can get a new farm bill passed in the first quarter of next year. We will see.
Yeah, I asked Moran about that as well. He said that might be a little optimistic, but he's on board and willing to help the House Ag Committee get that done.
Well, we will see what happens. Chip, thank you so much. You can catch Chip twice a day. Merry Christmas to you, Chip. All right, when we come back, a true maverick in the field. We're heading to Southern Illinois next.
Watch Markets Now with Michelle Rook on the Farm Journal YouTube channel, keeping you updated throughout the day on the markets at the open, midday, and close. Find out what moved the markets today and what to expect the market to do next.
Mavericks in the Field on U.S. Farm Report is brought to you by John Deere. Connecting your farm is easier than ever, from just the basics to being able to make real-time decisions wherever you are. John Deere has the tech you need.
Well, one of my favorite quotes is from Albert Einstein. He said, "The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results." Well, for one young farmer in Illinois, he knows in order to excel, he has to be bold and be different.
At just 29 years old,
It's one of the things that we can probably see the biggest return on investment.
this Illinois farmer is always exploring ways to be more productive.
Spots that used to be, let's say for soybeans, were once 20 bushel, now they're getting all the way up to 50 to 70 bushel beans in those wet holes.
Chase Saylor says those yield increases are because of this, a GPS ditch grader.
It's a pretty much surface drainage tile, if you want to look at it that way. So it's allowing us, it's a lot cheaper than putting drainage tile in a field, but we can go out there, take the topography of any field, and we're overlaying that with yield maps.
Now, instead of guessing if low-yielding spots in the field are due to water issues or compaction, they use all that data to know exactly what the culprit is.
And then we're able to go out there with this ditcher and GPS grade it, and we're able to make sure that water flows to where it needs to.
It's that attention to detail and Saylor's ability to turn to technology to solve problems on the farm that makes this Southern Illinois farmer a true maverick.
We're going to admit when we're wrong, and we're always willing to learn. So I think that's a huge role and key in trying to be better is really diving deep each year what you did wrong. Because if you only focus on the things you did right, you're never going to have growth.
Saylor Farms is fully grasping onto precision farming, able to drill down their decisions to the acre.
Right now, we're using about every part of precision technology that you can possibly use, and that's going all the way from auto row guidance, the kind of the bare minimum, to section control on your planters, and now we're going into tram lines where we're trying to limit the compaction zones on all of our fields.
In this area, the two biggest limiting factors to yields are either too much or too little water, and then compaction.
So with the use of tram lines and auto path from John Deere Op Center, we're able to pull into the field, already have the field mapped out and the route that we want to take, and we're taking that same 60-foot pass on every application that we do. So that's allowing us to come in the fall and inline rip only where our equipment's ran.
But what goes into those decisions? Well, that all comes down to data.
We have so much data anymore, all the way from our soil tests that we do every other year on a test, and then this is where we're working really close with our agronomist. So we're pairing up different seed varieties to different soil types to make sure that we're getting the biggest bang for our buck in that aspect. And then kind of the gut feeling is whenever you go to plant, like, is today the right day to plant? Are the conditions right? Trying to make the right decisions in the right time is some of the biggest key factors.
Saylor admits their farm used to comb through bad data, but now through Op Center, they finally have good data, something they go through daily.
So even from our see and spray maps where we're going out with our sprayer, we get in these weed pressure maps, and each year we're able to learn and build off of that and make sure that, in that particular field that we're doing a better job. And it's kind of helping us make decisions, what type of chemicals to use for certain fields.
From better able to decide what chemicals to use to knowing which seed variety needs to be planted on every single acre, Harvest Profit is another tool that Saylor now relies on.
Harvest Profit is a neat tool where we're able to put every overhead cost that we have in our farming operation, all the way from our employees to the random bills we get from the parts stores. So you get a true number of all right, how much does it cost to run this 1 acre? And so when we're spraying and spreading throughout the field, we have all of our chemical prices and our fertilizer prices in Harvest Profit, and it's just continually giving you a calculator throughout the field on a per acre basis.
There's no shortage of technology and precision tools on this farm, but what may be the Saylor's biggest key to success is the people they surround themselves with.
As a farm, it's just like a sports team. You're only as good as your weakest link. So, we have 12 different guys, and all of them play a huge role, whether it's planting, harvesting, spreading, spraying. Every role, it needs to be done just as good as the best guy. And, I feel like we have that as a team.
And not even 30 years old, Chase Saylor just may be wise beyond his years, and he has big plans for the next 30 years.
I'm a third-generation farmer. We're always looking towards that next generation, trying to make decisions and set up the farm to where we're successful for years to come. And I hope to be here for another 100 years.
Quite the operation. Thanks, Chase. Well, when we come back, one of the most selfless gifts you can give. A touching story from Wisconsin. That's next. Well, this coming week, many folks will be traveling and spending time with friends and family for Christmas. And next weekend, we'll join that celebration with our annual Christmas in the Country special. It's the time of year we celebrate the holidays with the people and places that make rural America special. This year, we traveled to Stratford, Wisconsin to meet a dairyman Brian Forrest. This operation has a history of family helping family. And a few years ago, when a cousin was in need of a life-saving liver transplant, well, he stepped in.
I just remember seeing Richard, rolling into the room, and we joked around about well, he's really a Bear fan, poor guy. I mean, and we talked about maybe having a little bit of a Packer, part in him. So maybe that would, that could be a bonus too in this whole thing. And so it was really pretty touching. I mean, it was really amazing.
And it wouldn't be the last time Brian would step in to help save a life. This is just one of the amazing stories we'll be sharing next weekend for Christmas in the Country. You can watch that show Christmas Day on Ag Day or next weekend on U.S. Farm Report. That does it for U.S. Farm Report this weekend. I hope all of you have a very Merry Christmas, and we hope you join us next weekend as we work to build on our tradition. Have a great weekend, everyone.
U.S. Farm Report is produced and distributed by Farm Journal Broadcast.